Hello and welcome to the, it's what, like January 8th, 2018? To the Patreon Party People podcast, of course. I am, of course, your host, Ryan Bloom, of course. Hey guys, how you doing? What's up? I guess things are all right for me. Again, if things sound a little bit weird, I'm still playing with a recording setup here. This time I'm recording from inside my closet. I'm hoping, because, I have clothes around me, right? I have shirts, and I have sweatshirts, and I have jackets, and things like that, and those absorb, like, the way sound gets reflected. And also I have, another pair of doors here to absorb outside sounds, because with where this apartment is located, it's kind of behind, like, a shopping mall, almost, like a mini mall. It's just like a mini mall, and we finally went driving around to get a feel for the neighborhood a couple weeks ago, and it's actually kind of ironic because most of the mini mall probably had stores in them at one point and no longer does, and our apartment just so happens to be behind the one last place in the entire mini mall that still has a business open, and it's a furniture store. So the timing of recording a podcast, probably the timing of like recording a video review audio is a little weird because it means unless I wait until after dark, which, comes with its own set of problems. If you remember, like back in Colorado, I would mostly actually record these podcasts after dark because, I just liked how much more quiet it was. Normally, you wouldn't have cars driving by. All that is like 10 times here at the new apartment. We have a huge parking lot. I was talking about this with someone else recently. There's probably more people living in this apartment complex than a 10-block radius of our old house, because it was a house, it was an old farmhouse. But, we have all this traffic from the parking lot. We have the one open business in the mini mall, and it's a furniture store, so they always have like delivery trucks backing up, and they're always slamming things around. We just had a garbage truck drive by, which is, as you might know, the noisiest thing in the world, even though trash day isn't until tomorrow, Tuesday. It's weird. Maybe they pick up garbage every day at that furniture store or something, or maybe they like called in a special delivery or whatever, but I'm trying something new here with the audio setup. We're going to try this little closet thing. There's just enough room in this closet for a tiny little wooden TV tray, which is what the microphone is sitting on right now, and the big office chair that I bought on Black Friday, which is, this plush Serta it's actually like a really nice office chair. I think it sells normally for like $150, and I got it for like $60. So, it's a very nice office chair. I like it a lot. Maybe I talked about this in the last podcast. I don't really like the material it's made out of. My last office chair was kind of like, fake leather, and this is more plush than that. This is actual like fabric, and that's going to get gross over the years. But I'm happy with how comfortable it is, let's say. But yeah, it has been a month. It was actually, I think it was it yesterday or the day before? I think it was the day before, December's podcast went up on my YouTube channel, because if you don't know, and I think most of you do, but it bears repeating for those of you who might not, all these podcasts now go up on YouTube a month after the Patreon gets it. So, if you're a free listener, you're listening to this probably on YouTube, which, gets a good 150, 200 views. I don't know if people listen to the podcast all the way through, but I do seem to be like gaining kind of an audience, which is weird. Normally I'm used to doing this podcast for like 15 people, and it's like, nobody probably cares. Nobody probably listens to it. And then I look at the YouTube metrics, and it's like, 150 views, and I'm actually getting comments left on the podcast from people who not only listen to it, but listen to it all the way through, and that's a weird feeling for me. I can't remember where I was going with this train of thought now. But yeah, that's right. Now I remember. I still haven't set up my desktop or anything like that. The computer is still busted. I actually don't remember if I mentioned that in the last podcast. It was a 2-hour podcast. And after I'm done with these podcasts, like, I feel like it's such a stream of consciousness kind of thing for me where, 20 minutes after I'm done, you could ask me a question about what I said on the podcast and I wouldn't remember because, I do write show notes out and maybe that's the reason why I always forget what I say on these podcasts because usually I write very super detailed show notes, almost to the point where it's almost a script, but not quite a script. It is line by line every single point I want to make as I make it. So, it'll be kind of ad-libbed, but it'll mostly, I'm mostly just reading off this document, which I'm not doing right now, actually, because not much has changed in the last month. It's mostly been just surviving Christmas for us. We have been hauling more stuff out of my brother's shed, as we said we were going to do. Just getting more and more stuff moved in with the room we have and just kind of getting settled in without really thinking too hard about fixing computers, things like that. There's also just been weird scheduling conflicts. I've been having problems sleeping lately, which, normally I keep pretty weird hours anyway. Again, I tend to be kind of a night owl. I like to work after dark, after everyone else goes to sleep, because then it's there's a lot less distractions for me. I don't really, get bogged down with talking to friends and keeping up with Twitter and things like that. Once things quiet down at night, then it's okay, well, there's nothing for me to be distracted by, so then I really buckle down and I work. So, I keep pretty weird hours anyway, but usually I don't really have trouble sleeping like I've been having trouble sleeping. I've been having, kind of nightmares. I'm a little bit homesick. It's not a big deal. There was a span of a couple days there where I was having reoccurring nightmares basically. And that was a huge bummer. That left me in a really bad mood. But, once I get a good night's sleep where I don't have a depressing nightmare, then I'm fine. It doesn't really matter. But, just weird sleep schedule mismatches, things like that. We haven't really had a chance to go look at a thrift store, look at a flea market to find a desk for me to set up my computer because, I was thinking about that. I think it was probably right after last month's podcast, I was thinking, why don't I just fix my computer? Why is this just sitting here? I need to do something with it. And then I realized that even if I fixed that desktop, I don't have anywhere to set it. I could fix it. I could have it ready to go, ready to turn on. And I don't have any room to set a keyboard. I don't have any room to set a monitor. I only just, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, we have this little card table, kind of. It's this thin, tiny little table. It's probably about, we'll say 5 feet long by 2 feet wide. It's just enough space where I can set my laptop and have room for a mouse. Because previously my laptop was sitting on this TV tray that the microphone is currently sitting on right now. And, now I have space to use a mouse for my my laptop, but I was using that table at my brother's when I had my desktop set up there briefly before it exploded again, and there was just barely enough room for my television to set on that table and have enough room for a keyboard. And that's because that desktop, my desktop computer, my brother had a dresser in that room, and that's where the tower was sitting. I don't have a dresser like that here, so there would be nowhere for the tower to go. I'd have room for a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse, and nothing else, which, is kind of a problem when you don't have anything to hook those up to. So we still need to get somewhere, I need to buy something to put the tower on. Be a desk, be, just a really big table, a bigger table than I'm using right now, maybe 2 tables. It's all about figuring out what's available so that I can, figure out my budget and actually buy what I need. But that probably won't happen, I get the feeling, until we fully unload everything that's left in my brother's shed, which is, I think we're about halfway through what all is in there. We've made 4 trips now? So, there's still boxes in there. We still have like an old chest freezer, if you know what those are. It's like, when you go to a supermarket where they have like the ice cream bars in there or whatever. It's kind of like that. It's a personal chest freezer, like a chest, like a treasure chest that opens like that. That's at my brother's shed, and like maybe like a dozen boxes left. We were actually supposed to go over there today, but again, sleep schedule mismatches. I'm awake, my mom is asleep, and I can't very well go over there by myself because I don't know how to drive yet. Like, I'm 34 and I don't know how to drive. And that's one of those things that, like, it's really depressing when I think about it, because, you'd think, I'm 34, I should know how to drive. Like, it was a big rite of passage in high school, getting your license and learning to drive. And that's just something I, like, avoided because, I've talked about it before, like the whole depression thing I had in high school that eventually ended up making me drop out. I never did any of that stuff. I just kind of laid in bed at home having like the worst panic attacks of my life, to the point where I wouldn't even like take a shower because I was afraid like something was wrong with the water or something. Like, I was a crazy person in high school. The stress got to me so much, like, ugh. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're not here to talk about how weird and, I guess, neurotic I am. It's like, is that like a neurosis? People use the term neurotic all the time, and I'm not sure anyone uses it, or, not sure anyone uses it in the proper context. I actually had someone compliment my articulation recently, and that was weird. Like, I guess, again, we're just going on tangents here because I don't really have a script, because we don't really have a lot to talk about this month, but that's something I've definitely focused on with, like, I almost said voice acting, like voice over. Because I tend to slur my words if I'm not really paying attention to how I enunciate. So usually when I read from a script, I try and make sure people can understand what I'm saying. But actually, I think that's probably about all I have to talk about, is that, hey, nothing really has happened in my life since the last time we talked. Because it's basically just been... I was talking to my friends about this the other day. Like, all the family get-togethers I've been to just since we moved in the apartment. Like, never mind how many I've been to since July, since we got here in Nevada. Usually in Colorado, we would only go to family get-togethers like on Thanksgiving, maybe 4th of July and Thanksgiving, and that was it. We'd maybe go to like a nephew's birthday party or something here and there, but usually we spent most holidays at home, and I don't mind that. Like, I actually kind of prefer chilling out at home for Christmas and New Year's and Halloween and whatever else. And since we've been out here, man, we have less family out here in Nevada than we did in Colorado, but they love family get-togethers out here. Since we moved into the apartment on November 18th, I have been to 3 Christmas dinners, 1 birthday party, a Christmas recital, and we were supposed to go to a Christmas tree lighting ceremony, but I ended up contracting the flu, so we couldn't really go to that. But that's like 5 or 6 things in as many weeks. Like, it was every week, basically, we were supposed to go do something with the family. And that's not something I'm used to quite yet, is seeing family that much, that often, and having to plan every week to go somewhere. I'm used to just chilling out with my friends on the internet, like, we stream movies and things like that. But that's something I can't really plan on anymore. But, that's it. Like, I've been going to family dinners and stuff for the last month. That has been my life. That and hauling boxes out of my brother's shed. So, now that we're probably 20 minutes into this podcast already, what I figured I'd do for this, special occasion, I'm trying to get my tablet to turn on here and it's not. Oh, that was bright. I don't have any lights on here in this closet, and I just got blasted in the face with a bright tablet. I'm not really doing any Game of the Year stuff this year, because generally people don't seem to care. So, since we're running low on information to talk about here in the podcast, I figured we'd talk about Game of the Year stuff. And if you guys know me, I don't really play a lot of games in the calendar year that they come out, and this hasn't been any different. I guess I've played a few 2017 games, a few more than usual, but really not very many at all. with the move and everything, actually, my game spending habits are way, way, way down compared to usual. Like, so I use this website, Backloggery.com. It is very useful. There are many sites like it now. Most sites, gaming sites worth their salt, have some kind of way to like track a collection, a library of games. But I've been using Backloggery for like 5-6 years at this point. So, every game I've ever owned, every game I've ever played is entered into my Backloggery. So, we can actually just see how many games I buy on a year-by-year basis. And let's see. In 2015, I bought 141 games, and that sounds like a lot. That's like a number that surprises me. But then I also realize, I don't know if you guys can hear that. I'm going to have to see if that picks up on the podcast. That is a delivery truck backing into the furniture store and making an awful lot of noise. Hopefully that doesn't pick up on the microphone. But, so like 141 new games, that's a lot. But I shop a lot through like Humble Bundles, right? So, it'll be like a $1 tier on a Humble Bundle where you'll get like 3, 5, 10 games, whatever. And, through a Humble Bundle, you can end up with a lot of games, like throughout the year, more games than you'll ever play in your lifetime. And, more and more places are giving games away for free now, It's like Humble Bundle gives away games for free now. C.A.G.E.D gives away games for free now. Steam will have things where for one weekend you go to a game store page and you can register it for free. So even just through like free games every year, you can end up with like 30, 40, 50 games a year and you don't even pay for them. So, 141 new games in 2015 isn't really that extreme. I'm just putting this into context. And then 2016, this is where things got really out of hand. I think 2016 is where I bought literally every single Humble Bundle that year. I paid at least $1 into it. And in 2016, I ended up with 266 new games. So with, these huge numbers in mind, 266 new games in 2016. Last year, I only ended up getting a little over 100 new games. So that is like, a huge step down. That's less than 2015. That's less than 2016 by a huge margin. And it's all because of like this moving stuff. So I didn't really get that many new games last year. Like, 100 is still a big number. That's like, I don't know, like 8 new games a month every month. But, again, free games, things like that. These small little mini game collections. And with the way Backloggery works, it's not like a perfect tracking system. Sometimes I'll remember like I have an old game. Like I'm really bad at remembering to update my Backloggery. So I'll get we have like the Steam Christmas sale at the end of the year, for example. And I'll forget to go to Backloggery and enter in all the new games I get. So those will roll over to the next year. Like right now, I'm at 11 new games for 2018, and actually I've only bought 3 just in the last, couple weeks. Not even that. I'm looking at this list. Yeah, I've bought 3 games this month, technically. And it says I'm already 11 in the hole, and that's because of stuff I got for Christmas. But anyway, we'll go through 2017's games, and, I'm not going to talk about every single game I got last year, but I'm going to talk about, the notable things. We're just going to go month by month, I guess. So, let's see. Scrolling down. Here we are, the start of 2017. What do we got? I'm not sure that this was actually a 2017 game, but I have listed here that I finished Fast Racing Neo. Maybe I feel like I've talked about this on the podcast before. Fast Racing Neo is an okay game. That's the Wii U version, by the way, because I don't have a Switch. And it's fine. It's a kind of like an F-Zero kind of game with an Ikaruga color swapping mechanic, if you know what that means. Basically, you have boost pads on courses that are either blue or orange, and you have to flip between the colors to match the color of the boost strip, the boost pad, to actually, get a speed boost. If you match the wrong color, then you actually get slowed down when you touch Like, if you're orange and the strip is blue and you drive over it, then you get slowed down. But if you're orange and the strip is orange, then you get a speed boost. It's really, like, an incredibly difficult game, like, frustrating as all get out. I like what Fast Racing Neo was going for, but I don't like Fast Racing Neo. I've heard that the Switch version is actually a little bit easier, it's a little more friendly, a little more forgiving, because the Wii U version is just, you make a single mistake and you might as well kiss that entire race goodbye. It is immensely, immensely frustrating. Listed here we have Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D for the 3DS. I can tell you right now, that was a 2016 game, but I can tell you this, it is 2018 and I still haven't finished Ocarina of Time 3D. I was actually thinking about this recently, about how much I've played Ocarina of Time 3D and how much that matches like the schedule I played the N64 original. The N64 original Ocarina of Time took me like a year and a half to finish because, I'd played a bunch and then I'd forget about it. And then, 2 or 3 months later, I'd think, oh, I need to get back to Zelda. And then, I'd play it a little bit and I'd forget about it again. And that's exactly what I've been doing with Ocarina of Time 3D. And actually, like, the real problem here is that right before we got on the train to move out here to Colorado, I got to the water temple in Ocarina of Time 3D. And even though the water temple is enhanced for easier accessibility or whatever in the 3DS version, it's still not a very fun dungeon. And it took probably from June until the middle of December before I finally cleared the water temple. Because you get into this really awful rhythm, right? Where you play the game for a little while, you realize the next objective you have to do in the dungeon, and then you play it for a little while and you think, okay, I've been playing for 30 minutes, an hour, and it's a portable game, so you think, okay, I'm done. I pause, I shut the game off. And then months pass, and then you have to re-familiarize yourself with where you left off in the dungeon. And that in itself can take upwards of a half an hour, just figuring out what rooms you've already been to, figuring out the layout of the dungeon. And with the water temple, it's especially confusing about, where you are, what you're supposed to do, where to go next, things like that. So I'd say 90% of the time I spent in the water temple was just figuring out where I left off last time. So, I'm past the water dungeon. I have to go on to the Shadow Temple, I think, next. The one where you get, the magnifying glass. That's where I'm headed next. And it's been 2 or 3 weeks since the last time I played Ocarina of Time 3D, so I should probably get back to that. Listed here is Crash Drive 2. That was a game I played one time for about 2 hours. If you don't know what Crash Drive 2 is, it's this it's like an indie game, I guess that's kind of like a weird definition to give something. But if you remember Joyride Turbo from Xbox Live Arcade, it's this you race around in, it's this weird half step between Mario Kart and Forza. And you drive around in these pseudo-cartoony, pseudo-realistic cars as your Xbox 360 avatar. And, there's this stunt system, and it's kind of open world, but it's kind of not. And there's kind of races, but there's kind of not. And if you play that game online, Joyride Turbo, it kind of runs through this playlist of objectives as you race through this open world zone. And that's kind of what Crash Drive 2 is like. Crash Drive 2 is not an offline game. There's no single player component at all. That game is 100% online all the time. And it's kind of like an MMO in the sense where you'll be dropped into a map with 40 or maybe not 40, maybe 20 other racers. And there'll be this running timer constantly, or it'll be the next event starts in 2 minutes. And you can, in between events, you can just drive around and goof off and explore the map or whatever. And then the timer ends and it'll be okay, the current challenge is to do as many stunts as possible. And whoever does the most stunts wins. And then you'll get 2 minutes of downtime, and then it'll start the next challenge. And the next challenge will be a checkpoint race around the open world map. And then it'll be, how in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, one of the multiplayer modes was that you could claim pieces of the environment for your team. That's one of the event types in Crash Drive 2. It's very fun. I had, tons of fun when I played it online that one time, but it's also just kind of the sort of game that doesn't really appeal to me because I don't like the idea that there is no single player content, that I can't just drive around these environments by myself and explore them in the peace of being alone. I don't know if you guys can tell or not, but I kind of value my alone time. I'm kind of an introvert, but maybe not. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder exactly how introverted versus extroverted I am, but I do know that, like, social spaces and crowded areas really do leave me feeling pretty drained by the time I get out of there, so I'm probably an introvert. But Crash Drive 2 is a game for extroverts, and as much fun as I had with those 2 hours, I've never gone back to it. And, like, there's more environment types is something else. Like, you start out in kind of like this desert area, this like Wild West ghost town almost, with all these like Hot Wheels trick ramps and everything all around. And the idea is that you have to win enough multiplayer events to unlock the next map. And that actually creates like this really weird divide in the online community for Crash Drive 2, where all the players are on that Wild West Ghost Town desert map, and nobody is playing on the later maps in the game because nobody ever gets far enough to unlock them. And each map is treated like a separate server, so it's this weird thing where you're not just unlocking maps, you're unlocking like new servers in new locations, and just nobody ever gets past that first map. Everyone's just always playing on the Ghost Town, so it's not a bad game. It's just eh. Also on here is a game called Blameless, and Blameless is a game that I only just barely remember. I think it's free on Steam. I don't think you have to pay for Blameless. It is kind of a walking simulator, kind of a survival horror game. From what I remember, what was Blameless? You're like a dude who gets kidnapped? Like abducted by a human trafficking ring or something, and you get trapped in like this construction zone where they're remodeling a house or something, and you're trapped in this basement with all this construction equipment, and the whole point of the game is that you have to solve these puzzles and escape and get out before the killer comes back and kills you. And it's okay. It's not like it'll take probably an hour to finish. In that context, and the fact that it's so short, I'd actually probably recommend it. I do remember having a bit of fun with it, but I do remember the ending being sort of abrupt and weird. Like it just comes out of nowhere, and it's like, that's it? That's all that happened? I do remember looking it up on YouTube that there are more than one ending. There is more than one ending. I'm very good at grammar. But yeah, in the context of it being like this free short walking simulator game, like there are puzzles. They're kind of like Resident Evil puzzles, right? Where you need XYZ key to fit in XYZ door. You need cranks for things. You need hammers and nails and crowbars to pull wood planks off of door frames and weird stuff like that. It's not too hard. It's not too long. And again, I think it's free, so, you can't really do much worse than free. What else? I'm basically just looking for games that either I finished last year or games that jump out at me on this list. Wait, I own Epic Battle Fantasy 4? Huh. For those of you who don't know, Epic Battle Fantasy, I remember, hearing that game was sort of notable because it's kind of a Final Fantasy clone, but it's got kind of an edge to it. I guess some people would put it in the same category of if you ever played Cthulhu Saves the World or Breath of Death 7. Those are Zeboyd games. Good little parody RPGs. I had a lot of fun with them. They started out as Xbox Live indie games, and now they're on Steam. Usually they come, you'll get Cthulhu Saves the World and Breath of Death 7, in a bundle for 99 cents. They're not very long RPGs. They're a good time. I recommend them. But I remember hearing Epic Battle Fantasy in the same sort of category as those two games. A little bit longer, a little bit more meatier, but still kind of like this sort of Final Fantasy parody RPG in a sense. But I didn't know I owned that. That's one of those games where you see it on sale on Steam and you think, maybe I'll get that one day. And then you don't. Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World, that's a game that I thought I would chew through immediately because Woolly World is actually a really good game. It's probably the second best Yoshi's Island game ever made because I think I talked about this a lot last year when I bought it, but, most of the Yoshi's Island sequels suck, like a lot. Most of them are just these really like generic, poorly programmed, ugly games with like awful music. Like you have, what is it, Yoshi Topsy Turvy, that DS tech demo thing. Gosh, what was that called? What was it? Oh, I don't know, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Like that Nintendo DS launch title Yoshi game where you have to aim eggs with the touchscreen and draw clouds, and that was terrible too. There was Yoshi's Island 2, Yoshi's New Island, and there was like another game in there somewhere on the Game Boy Advance, but they were all just mediocre at best, let's say. And then finally, with Yoshi's Woolly World, Nintendo came in and they were like, okay, stop crapping up the Yoshi license and let us hire the Kirby's Epic Yarn team, and then we'll bring back like the guy who invented Yoshi's Island, and they kind of collaborated and made Yoshi's Woolly World, and it's actually a really good game. It's just more Yoshi's Island, but actually like the yarn aesthetic is pretty good. I like it. Like I can't really say anything more specific than that. Like that's probably more of a sign of just how terrible the other Yoshi games were, is that, all it takes is one good game that you can't even really describe why it's good. And it's probably no, like, great shock to anyone that I haven't finished Yoshi's Woolly World yet. I think I'm on, like, World 5 of, I think, 6 total, so I am near the end of the game. It's just, with moving and everything, it's one of those things where you buy a game while you're moving somewhere, and then you just get caught up in everything else, and I just never went back to it. Of course, if I was going to pick one game of the year this year, it would be Breath of the Wild. I think it came out in March. In the entire year of 2017, I think I put in like 300 hours into Breath of the Wild. Just not long before we moved out of my brother's place, I went back and I finally finished out the last like 10 or so shrines I was missing, because there are 120 shrines in that game, and I found at least 106 by myself. So I ended up using a guide to get the last, 12, 15, 10 shrines that I was missing, and that is a very good game. Like, that is probably the best Zelda game ever made at this point. I don't think that's a topic of dispute, but I think there probably would be people who still hold games like A Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time up above Breath of the Wild, but for me, it is Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild was just an incredible surprise on every front. The only thing I didn't like about Breath of the Wild was the boss fights. When that game actually, when you get to like the end of one of the very few dungeons, when you finally fight Ganon himself, it was kind of a letdown. Like, Ganon himself looks amazing. Like, it is insane what they did to that character design, but the actual, both phases of the fight were just, I don't know. I get the feeling it's one of those things where, they let you do everything in that game out of order. You can start Breath of the Wild and you can go fight Ganon first thing when you spawn into that world and get off the Great Plateau. And because of that, like, every boss is just as hard as any other boss. Like, they never really increase in complexity. They never really increase in difficulty. It's just kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again, and that's a bummer. And then Ganon, like, spoilers for a game that is almost a year old, I guess. Skip ahead, 2 minutes, 5 minutes if you don't want to hear about this. But Ganon himself, one of my big problems with Twilight Princess, spoilers for this too, is that when you finally get to the final Ganon fight, Ganon is just a really hard version of a Darknut in Twilight Princess, and in Breath of the Wild, Ganon's first form is just a really hard version of one of those Guardian turrets. where, if you're really good at parrying laser beams with your shield, then you've basically won the fight. Like, Ganon can't really touch you at that point. So, it looked amazing, but it was kind of a letdown from a gameplay perspective right there at the end of the game. But, I spent 300 hours in that game. Like, I can't say it wasn't amazing, because it was. The only, really downside is that once you get enough distance from Breath of the Wild, like the DLC came out a few weeks ago, I have zero interest in that DLC, because once those wheels stop turning, they seized up and they ain't moving at all. Like, I cannot get any momentum forward, yeah, you probably know what I mean, right? I just can't get any momentum of interest on touching the DLC for Breath of the Wild, because it's like, what? You have to spend $20 on the DLC, and it adds, maybe another 3 hours of content. And that's just, I have zero interest in any of that. I got my fill of Breath of the Wild and then some, so there is no way that I'm probably going back to that game anytime soon. Though, every now and then, the mood hits me. I'll think, oh man, I should start a new game on Breath of the Wild. And if I spent $20, then I could get Master Mode, and then I could start a new game on Breath of the Wild, and then, the moment passes, and it's just like, ugh, I played 300 hours of that game. I don't need to play any more Breath of the Wild for a long time. Bunch of Halloween games that I bought this year, thinking I would do Dare to Scare, that I never actually had a chance to do. Banjo-Kazooie, the original Banjo-Kazooie, that was a pretty good game. That's about it. Banjo-Kazooie is one of those games that, for a really long time, you always had that one friend, right? Who was like, oh, Banjo-Kazooie is the best game in the world. And you're like, yeah, whatever, dude. Mario 64 was great, but Banjo is just Banjo. Who cares? I tried multiple times over the last 15 years, 10 years, trying to get into Banjo-Kazooie, and it never really clicked for me. There was something about it that just always rubbed me kind of the wrong way. Not even necessarily rubbed me the wrong way. It just never grabbed me. It never got its hooks into me where I felt like I wanted to finish it. It was always just kind of Banjo-Kazooie is over there, and that's fine, and I don't hate it, but it can just be over there and whatever. It's something I can safely ignore, let's say. And then I ended up getting the Xbox Live Arcade version for really cheap, and I almost entirely marathoned that game in a week. And not even marathoned it. I mean, I got 100% completion. I found every note, every jiggy, every jinjo, everything that you can find in that game. I did it. And I'm not a person who does 100% clear runs in video games. I have never gotten 100% clear in Mario 64. I never got 100% clear in Sonic Adventure or Sonic Adventure 2. Never got 100% clear in basically every game I've ever owned. You're looking at Mr. Bare Minimum of Effort here. Usually if there's bonus content locked behind finding MacGuffins, I'm usually content with never seeing it. I think I still have my original Super Mario 64 cartridge, and I think the most shines I ever got... Shines? The most stars, power stars, I ever got in Super Mario 64, I think I topped out at 102 out of 120. Because I just had, no interest. And that 102 is after, owning the game for 20 years or whatever. And that's just how it ended up. I just never actually was interested in 100% clearing that game. So to buy Banjo-Kazooie, marathon the entire game over the course of maybe a week, and get 100% completion, I don't know what happened to me. I don't know if I just needed an escape, but it's something I did. And now I have this, I've turned into that guy. I've turned into the guy who has intense Banjo-Kazooie nostalgia. I'll hear Banjo-Kazooie music playing somewhere, and I'll get these starry-eyed memories, Rusty Bucket Bay. Is that a Banjo-Kazooie level? No, I don't remember. Yeah, Rust Bucket Bay is a Banjo-Kazooie level, and Clanker's Cavern, and Bubble Gloop Swamp, and Mad Monster Mansion. For some reason, it caught me at the right time. I was in the right mood, and I love Banjo-Kazooie now, and now I'm sort of terrified to think about Banjo-Tooie, because there was a period in my life, like 6 years ago, where I did play through probably around half of the original Banjo-Kazooie, and again, that was one of those times where the game just didn't really grab me. It was just something I did idly while I was listening to a podcast or something, just something to, fill time, to, keep my hands from being idle or whatever while I was listening to a podcast, and I ended up getting through about halfway through the game, and I got bored of it, quit Banjo-Kazooie, and started up Banjo-Tooie for a little bit. I ended up playing only like 1 or 2 worlds of Banjo-Tooie, and I just couldn't stand it. Like, Banjo-Kazooie is the sort of game where it's like, I'm like, whatever, I don't really care. I can safely ignore it. It's over there. People who love it can love it, and I don't really love it. But playing Banjo-Tooie, that game is, like, probably actively repulsive, and for a lot of the same reasons that I don't like it's for a lot of the same reasons I don't like Donkey Kong 64. It just feels like this really, like, slow burn slog sort of game where everything is spaced a little too far apart. There's too many collectibles. It's just a game of excess, and that is a big turnoff for me. But Banjo-Kazooie 1 for Xbox Live Arcade, thumbs up from me. They did actually go back for the Xbox Live Arcade release. I don't know, I talked about this in past podcasts, but it bears repeating. They did actually touch up that game a little bit. They've, fixed some, we'll say, like, mechanical things about it, just to, like, streamline the game a little bit more and make it a little bit more palatable. Like the original N64 version of Banjo-Kazooie. So you have these collectibles in the game, right? They're sort of like Mario's coins. They're called notes. And in the original N64 version of Banjo-Kazooie, they treated notes like this weird, like, high score system. So if you'd if you'd enter a level, collect some notes, and then exit the level, when you re-entered the level the next time, all the notes would respawn and the level would reset to its default form, I guess, its default state. And I just clipped the microphone stand here with my hands because I'm making hand gestures. But you'd alter the level, you'd exit the level, you'd come back, and it would be reset. And it would say, oh, your record for this level is 75 notes. And until you collected 75 notes, it wouldn't count anymore towards your total. And I just bumped the microphone stand again. Because notes are like your one of the 2 or 3 progression blockers in Banjo-Kazooie. You often will reach note doors that require you to have collected a certain number of notes in order to progress to the next area. So, if you collect 99 notes in Mumbo's Mountain or whatever, it won't actually count the 1 note you're missing until you recollect the 99 again first. And then when you find the last note you're missing, then it counts towards your total. It's really, like, confusing and annoying, and the Xbox Live Arcade version does away with it completely. If you collect a note, it stays collected forever. And that is probably the number one best change they could have made to that game, because it really helps, like, clarify your goals in a big way. So yeah, Xbox Live Arcade version of Banjo-Kazooie, I think that's the same version that is in Rare Replay for the Xbox One. I almost said the PC. I wish Rare Replay was available for the PC. I would probably buy it, but only assuming that it was on Steam, and, it's kind of hit or miss with whether or not Microsoft lets that stuff go up on Steam. What else? I was going to say, I played a lot of Doom last year. I played through, it looks like, I don't know if that was actually last year, I played through and I finished Doom 2. I think it was through Beautiful Doom. I think I've talked about Beautiful Doom before. If you don't like Brutal Doom, and it's come out recently that the creator of Brutal Doom is probably not a very nice person. I remember hearing a little bit about a controversy recently that, like, Brutal Doom includes photos of, like, real dead corpses and stuff like that, and, you know, the guy who makes Brutal Doom is probably, like, one of those hyper-aggressive bros that is just, like, kind of a jerk to everyone, which, you know, makes sense when you think about Brutal Doom is like this hyper-masculine sort of version of Doom that's all super bloody and blah, 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 blah. You know, I'm not really keeping track of all that, so, you know, grain of salt with everything I just said. But what people might not like is that Brutal Doom also makes a bunch of changes to the mechanics of Doom to make it more brutal, let's say. So, you know, you have all these extreme, like, fatality kills and things like that. All this extra gore, all the guns are changed. You know, they have new functionality, there's new guns, there's, you know, all the enemies act different. People don't necessarily like that. They like the pure Doom experience. What Beautiful Doom does is it keeps all the core weapon balance, all the core enemy functionality, all that stuff, but it changes everything to have slightly better graphics, let's say. You have new particle effects, you have smoother animation on monsters and weapons, and, you know, everything just looks a little nicer, but it still keeps the core aesthetic, visual design of Doom. And so, you know, a couple years ago I played through Doom 1 through Beautiful Doom, and that was pretty good. And then I think early this year, I played through Doom 2 in Beautiful Doom, and that's a pretty good thing to do, I guess. You know, I had like a really like down opinion on Doom 2 for the really longest time, that it wasn't as good as Doom 1. And playing through Doom 2 this year kind of changed my opinion on that. You know, Doom 2 is just as good as Doom 1. For the longest time, I thought Doom 2 had like a lot longer, a lot more complex levels that were a lot easier to get lost in, let's say. And that might be partially true, but it's not as bad as I was originally making it out to be. It is still, you know, a fine game. That's basically all I have to say about it. I don't necessarily know that Doom 2 is better than Doom 1. A lot of people will say, oh, you know, Doom 2 has more monsters, it has an extra weapon, and, you know, that's fine, that's good. But I still think Doom 1 is probably the better game of the two. It's just Doom 2 is also, you know, we're talking a splitting of the hairs of like, you know, 9.9 versus 9.8, let's say. So, you know, Doom 2 is still a good game. And I keep getting them mixed up. Beautiful Doom, I would only recommend older versions of Beautiful Doom, because I did end up like tracking down a trailer just a few months ago while I was here in Nevada for a newer version of Beautiful Doom. And it looks like they're getting into the sort of the Brutal Doom sort of thing where they had like preview videos for new weapons, for balance changes for old weapons, things like that. Things that I don't necessarily think will make the game better because, I don't know, you know, classic games are classic games. And at some point, I used to be the guy who was like all about customizing his games, right? You know, downloading model edits and sound effects edits and even like modding stuff for myself. And then at some point, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years ago, I just completely lost interest in all of that. Like I still get into the thing where if there's something about a game that I don't like and I have the power to change it, then I will change it. Like with the Unleashed project, I released the S-Ranks Unleashed mod that, you know, refigures the ranking system to work a little bit more like the original Sonic Unleashed did. Very recently, I discovered that Sonic R on the PC now has a very slowly growing modding scene, and I released a mod to sort of make the sound effects in that game a little bit more palatable, because the ring sound in Sonic R is like this really like loud grating thing, especially when you hear, like when you collect a bunch of rings really close together, it ends up like kind of hurting my ears. So I made and I released a mod that makes the ring sound a little bit easier to listen to, let's say. But as far as just changing things for the sake of changing things, that's something I really fell hard out of doing. Like, we'll say long about the time I turned 25. I'm 34 right now. So, the idea that Beautiful Doom was just this graphics mod, and now it's turning into a graphics mod and a gameplay mod, doesn't really appeal to me. I'll stick with the version of Beautiful Doom I have right now that adds all the particle effects and all the improved sprite animation and things like that. And with that note, I'm going to take a break for a minute here. I've been thinking about this with my podcast for a while, that it would actually behoove me to take breaks in the middle of recording these, to just kind of like catch my breath, to recharge a little bit, because, with longer podcasts, because I guess we're, looking through my Backloggery list here, we're more than halfway through the year, but also I really need to go get a drink. So I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to go get something to drink, and then we'll resume after the music. So I'll see you guys in about 30 seconds. And I'm back. I went down and I checked the mail, and I got a nice hot glass of water to drink. You guys ever, drink hot water? I've been told that I'm kind of weird for sometimes getting a nice steamy glass of just, tap water, It I think it soothes the throat a little bit, and I get, funny looks when I say, I don't, drink it, super often. I just drink it, we'll say, I don't know, if I'm starting to feel like I'm getting a sore throat, and I definitely was feeling like I was getting a sore throat earlier, which is why I took the break. It's been about a half an hour for me, and I guess we'll just resume the list from where we left off. So we left off, it looks like, around June 1st. And I guess, it didn't come out in June, but I bought it in June, was Sonic Mania. And of course, for you out there who subscribe to my Patreon, who pledge to my Patreon, I guess is what I should say, the audio for the Sonic Mania video review is already up. The unedited, unprocessed audio for that. So I don't necessarily need to go super deep into detail about how I feel about that game. But Sonic Mania is okay. I've been trying to think about it in the context of a Game of the Year video or podcast or list or whatever you want to call it. And I don't know where I would put Sonic Mania. I mean, I guess given that, it is, we'll say, the second 2017 game on the list. I don't know if anything else I've talked about so far actually came out in 2017. Blameless might have, but I think that's old. So it's literally just Breath of the Wild and Sonic Mania right now. Obviously Sonic Mania would go under Breath of the Wild, but in the grand scheme of everything else I played last year, I don't know where I would put Sonic Mania. I liked Sonic Mania, but I didn't love Sonic Mania. That much should be clear. I think it has some problems to it that kind of hold it back as far as, enjoying it in the same way that I enjoy the other 2D classic Sonic games, because being a Sonic the Hedgehog fan, I guess I'll say that much. I hate defining myself like that because I feel like there are stigmas about being a Sonic fan, and I don't like to admit it. I will say that I am a Sonic fan. That much is obvious because a lot of the things I do, a lot of the subjects I talk about are focused on, talking about Sonic games and the culture and the community and everything else surrounding it. But, where was I going with this? I don't remember. I went off on a tangent and I forgot where I was going with this. But I guess... Oh, right. In the context of how I enjoy all the other Sonic games, because as a Sonic fan, I tend to replay Sonic games a lot. Like, we'll say, there are a lot of Sonic games I tend to replay at least one a month, we'll say. I rotate around between, like, Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2, the Genesis games, things like that. Even, like, bad Sonic games. Every now and then, I'll go back to, like, Sonic Heroes or Sonic 06 or even Shadow the Hedgehog. Games like those, I will, just to touch them, just for a second, just to go back and say, oh, right, Shadow the Hedgehog crushes my soul. That kind of thing. And... I feel like I tend to rank Sonic games based on my desire to replay them and how much I do actually touch when I do replay them. Like, I was talking about this with regards to, Sonic Rush on my Tumblr blog just, like a week ago. And Sonic Rush is a game that I really like, but I only play like 4 levels in that game when I go back and I replay it. And Sonic Rush Adventure is a game where I go back and I replay almost the entire game from start to finish every time I go back to it. And when I think about Sonic Mania in that context, I don't know if I'll ever feel like replaying it well, I shouldn't say ever. That is a long time. And as someone who also is openly against, say, not really liking Sonic C.A.G.E.D, because I don't like Sonic C.A.G.E.D. And I just went back and I replayed a little bit of Sonic C.A.G.E.D just, a week ago. Sonic Mania is not going to be a game I go back to very often because it is so long and it is so laborious to play. It is enjoyable, but it takes, I guess, like so much energy to actually like finish a level and especially face a boss because of how just compacted and compressed and dense that game is. It's so exhausting to play. And every now and then, like in the last, month, I've gotten this twinge, like, maybe I'll replay Sonic Mania, and then the feeling almost like immediately fades, and I don't think about it again for a while. So, I don't hate Sonic Mania. I don't want to sound like I hate Sonic Mania, but I don't love Sonic Mania, not the way other people love Sonic Mania, and in a way that kind of bums me out because I wish I did, love Sonic Mania like other people do. I am interested in seeing what this so-called Project Plus is. If you don't know about it, it's been found in the Steam database because, okay, let's go off on a tangent here for a minute. The way Steam works is kind of weird. What it actually does is all the games you find on the storefront are actually contained within Steam itself, which is to say, the client downloaded on your desktop has a complete and full list of every game on the storefront, all of them, even the ones that aren't public anymore. So, on your computer right now, if you have Steam installed, you have a database of every released and unreleased Steam game on the service. And there are tools out there that will analyze and dissect exactly, all the listings of released or unreleased games. And developers have actually gotten smart enough to kind of hide unreleased projects so that people can't tell, find unannounced games. But every now and then something still slips through the cracks, and certain things are impossible to hide, let's say. And something that showed up on the Steam version of Sonic Mania about a month ago was something called Project Plus, and nobody really knows what that is. It might be DLC, it might be the next big version update that fixes a bunch of bugs. Nobody really knows, and Sega hasn't announced anything yet, but Project Plus might be, like, who knows, it might be online multiplayer, it might be new levels, it might be new playable characters, maybe it's Steam Workshop support for all we know, but Project Plus is something attached to Sonic Mania right now. So who knows, maybe the game will get like a structural update, something like that, I don't know. So let's see, we were at June. The next time I updated my Backloggery was August. There was a game in August I finished called Halloween Forever. I maybe talked about this a little bit before. I've talked about it in the context of the game I'm making to sell on Steam, Overbite. But Halloween Forever is a game that the Game Grumps covered for Halloween, I think about 2 years ago at this point. It's this little, like, $7.99 Steam game, this very simple, almost Mega Man-like platformer, 8-bit graphics, chiptune music. You play as, like, this little pumpkin guy that spits out pieces of candy corn. It's very cute. So it went on sale, like, during the spring sale or something for, like, $3.99, and I ended up buying it. And, while I was without my desktop, while we were in the process of moving, we were staying at my cousin's, I installed Halloween Forever, and I ended up finishing most of it at her place, at my cousin's house, while we were staying with her before we got on the train to come out here to Nevada. And Halloween Forever is a pretty alright game. It's not very complex. It's, keeping with the... we'll say the theming of the era it's trying to imitate. It's kind of difficult, kind of challenging. There's no option to save your game. So every time you play Halloween Forever, you start from the very first level, and you have to play through the entire game in one sitting in order to see the ending, because it will not save your progress midway through the game. And if you run out of lives and you get a game over, then, you start over at level 1. And there are a bunch of Steam reviews saying that, this makes the game too difficult. And if I'm the kind of person who can finish Halloween Forever, then no, it's not too difficult, because, I'm better at games than I used to be, but I am still, I feel like, kind of a wuss when it comes to difficulty, especially like extremely high, frustrating difficulty. Games like Ghouls and Ghosts really, I guess the word I'm looking for is upset me, kind of. They really make me mad. Games like Gradius 3, Contra 3, Ghouls and Ghosts, these sort of notoriously extremely challenging games are not my style, and Halloween Forever is significantly easier than those games. It's the kind of game where, it takes you, a dozen, 2 dozen tries to actually get through it, but that's kind of part of the experience. The experience is learning how to play Halloween Forever, learning how your shots arc, because you don't just spit candy corn out in a straight line like Mega Man. You've got this like arc to your shot. You're kind of barfing out candy corn, and you have to learn the arc and learn enemy patterns and things like that. It's very much like a very classic retro experience where it's about practice and it's about, training yourself to understand boss patterns and enemy patterns and conserve health and look for secrets, because you really need, secrets are vitally important in this game. And that's one of the things that, does save, okay? So, in Halloween Forever, there's, 4 or 5 different playable characters, but you start out with this pumpkin-headed guy. And hidden characters are, stashed away in secret corners all over the game, and you have to find them to unlock them. And after you've found a secret character, there's a squash-headed guy, there's a witch, there's a pumpkin-headed guy with a Santa hat on. Once you find these secret characters, going back to where you found the secret character will be a free one-up. So it becomes very important not only to find all the secret characters, but to take those routes to get to the secret characters to get the free one-ups, because you're gonna need them. It's a game like that, right, where, finding secrets is important to clearing the game, because you will need the extra lives to finish it. And I did eventually end up finishing it as the witch character. And each different separate playable character all has their own shots, their own special abilities, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the witch is right now, but she is definitely the easiest of the 4 or 5 playable characters to go through Halloween Forever. It's a fun little game, even at $7.99 or whatever they're charging for it now. It is definitely worth picking up, I think, if you're a fan of retro-style platformer/shooter/action games. So that's a big Blaze Hedgehog endorsement for me. I think it actually came out in like 2014. It was an early Steam Greenlight game. There's a game on here called Refunct, and that is not the game that I'm thinking of. We'll get to it later, but there's a game I bought recently called something very similar to Refunct. Also on here is Hexen. No, I didn't play that in August. We'll get to that later as well. Okay, in October, I ended up... So I didn't buy this game, let's say. This is something I won for free. I don't know where it came from, but if you've ever been to the website Steam Gifts, steamgifts.com is basically a community of people who get a bunch of Steam games, like extra copies, and you can give them away for free to other users on the site. There's like a whole point system where you have only so many entries you can enter per day, but it's... bumped microphone stand again. There's not a lot of space here in this closet, folks. But hopefully that's one of the things I should have checked on the break, was checking to see how the audio came out, but I didn't actually do that, because to my ears, I can hear the sound reflecting off the walls in here in the closet, and I'm worried that everything I'm saying right now is unintelligible to you guys. But so steamgifts.com is a place where you connect your Steam account to steamgifts.com, and you can enter to win Steam games. They're all just like these keys you redeem on Steam. And what I ended up noticing one day is that a bunch of this hidden object game started coming through. A bunch of different hidden object games. That's their new name now. This genre is called the Hobject genre. No, a bunch of different hidden object games started flooding Steam Gifts. Oh my gosh. See, this is why I need to take breaks, is because my mouth gets like this, where like my brain is running faster than my lips and I start saying things incorrectly. And even though I was gone for like a half an hour, it's still happening. I need to slow down and actually think about what I'm saying. All these hidden object games started flooding Steam out of nowhere, and I don't know where they came from. I think there might have been like a Humble Bundle or something that was full of them. I don't actually know or remember. I remember, because sometimes that happens on Steam Gifts, is you'll check the site and all of a sudden, like, every page will be like the same 3 games. And then you'll know, oh, there's a Humble Bundle somewhere where, these games are being given away for super cheap and people have all these duplicates. So, there were all these hidden object games coming onto Steam Gifts. And one of them ended up being this game called Midnight Mysteries: Witches of Abraham. It is a hidden object game where the ghost of Abraham Lincoln sends you on a time-traveling quest to kill a coven of witches that have cursed his family. And what really caught my eye about this game was the banner artwork on Steam Gifts. It was this really, how do I even describe this? It was like a skeleton wearing a cowboy outfit with flaming eyeballs and twin pistols. And I thought, wow, that looks incredibly stupid and really awesome. I wonder if this game is any good. And I ended up looking into it a little bit and thinking, yeah, whatever, maybe I'll try this out. But obviously, I didn't want to buy it because it's a hidden object game. And objectively, okay, I won't say objectively, but, kind of screw hidden object games, right? They're not usually the kind of thing where you think, oh, yeah, hidden object games are great. No. So I didn't want to pay for this. And copies of this game, there were literally hundreds of copies of this coming through Steam Gifts all of a sudden. So I added it to my Steam wish list. And Steam Gifts has this option where you can look specifically for giveaways for games that are on your wish list. So in adding Witches of Abraham to my Steam wish list, suddenly in the wish list section of Steam Gifts, it is all the copies that are on the website are now showing up. So every day for like a week, I would just click to enter giveaways for Witches of Abraham. I ended up entering like, we'll say like 150 giveaways, and nobody else really likes hidden object games either, as it turns out, because a lot of these giveaways would like top out at like 150 or 75 entries. So my chances were like really up there to actually win the giveaway for this Witches of Abraham game, and as it turns out, I did. I ended up winning a free copy of Midnight Mysteries: The Witches of Abraham. And I think this was right around the time that my computer was fixed, it was running, everything seemed, for at least, like, we'll say, a good 2-week stretch, it seemed like my computer was fine, we'll say. And I ended up streaming Witches of Abraham, because also at the same time, Discord updated to have screen sharing. So I ended up doing screen share to my friends of this Witches of Abraham hidden object game, and I ended up playing through it to the end. And I can tell you, like, I enjoyed Witches of Abraham a lot more than I was expecting, because even though it claims to be a hidden object game, it's not actually that full of hidden object things. It's more like a point-and-click adventure game where you're talking to people, you're finding and not even really finding, you're just collecting items to use on puzzles. I think in Witches of Abraham, there's only like maybe 3 or 5 different hidden object sections total, and the rest of it is all just point-and-click adventure game puzzles. So, that's actually pretty cool in a sense, and it also does this thing that, maybe this is sacrilege or something for the point-and-click adventure game genre, but Witches of Abraham actually has a skip button. So if you get stuck on a puzzle, specifically if you don't want to do a hidden object section, you just click the skip button, and it has like a cooldown on it, so you can't just skip through every single puzzle in the game automatically. If you skip something, it might be like, 10, 15 minutes until you can skip the next puzzle. So, but that actually ends up being like a really useful thing when you're streaming a game to friends, and you want to keep the pace up where you're not getting stuck on like this stupid like sliding box puzzle or something like that. So you just click skip and the story progresses, and you get to see this dumb story about witches cursing Abraham Lincoln for, I guess the other part of this is, even though I enjoyed Witches of Abraham a lot more than I was expecting to, it's still not a very good game, like just straight up. It's not enough of a point-and-click adventure game. And specifically by that, I mean, like, the thing that really makes a point-and-click adventure game, like, awesome is the dialogue, right? You talk to people, you get all these dialogue options, you ask them questions about stuff, and specifically in the context of, like, we'll say Sam and Max, a lot of the fun of a point-and-click adventure game is hearing, like, the absurd responses to your dialogue choices, and that's one of the things that, like, The Walking Dead did right? Was where your dialogue mattered. You'd have a dialogue option, you'd pick something, and it would affect a future story event. It would say, Clementine will remember that. And that dialogue is what makes adventure games, like, really amazing in certain regards. Witches of Abraham has almost no dialogue. It has almost no story. It's not entirely clear exactly why you're doing what you're doing. It's not clear how the witches are cursing Abraham Lincoln. There's only one scene in the entire game that ever actually depicts a curse. And it's kind of a cool scene because, it's the ghost of Abraham Lincoln's son, and he's having like the energy sucked out of him by a demon or something that's present in the room, or like a poltergeist, and you have to solve a puzzle to trap the poltergeist and exorcise it while also keeping the boy safe. And that's like the only real meat of the story. The rest is all just like, the ghost of Abraham Lincoln will appear to you and say, like, you've got to help me. The witches are a coven of blah, 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 and you must go to this time period and stop them from doing this vaguely nebulous thing that doesn't really seem to do anything. And basically you just, like, teleport to a specific time period. There's, like, a checklist, a set number of puzzles you're supposed to complete in that time era. And then Abraham Lincoln appears and he tells you, good work, let's go to the next time period. And you do that like 4 or 5, 6, 7 times. Probably like more like 10, actually. I don't know. But you do that over the course of like 2.5 hours, and then the game just ends with the ghost of Abraham Lincoln's family being like, thank you for saving us from the curse. And then the credits roll. And like Jesse James is involved, and like Jesse James is the skull guy. He's the cowboy with the skull and the flaming eyes and the 2 pistols. And he's like the coolest thing about that game, but also he doesn't do anything. He just kind of menaces you a little bit. He'll like vaguely threaten like a Saturday morning cartoon villain. He'll be like, oh, I'm gonna get you. And then he doesn't do anything. He has these pistols, he has these magic powers, but... Okay, so Jesse James is a witch, right? That is the context of him appearing in this game. And he doesn't do any witch stuff. He doesn't shoot lightning bolts. You don't see him do anything. He just appears in some locations and says, I'm gonna get you. And that's it. That's the extent of the cool guy on the box art doing his thing. And he only appears like 3 or 4 times in the story total. He appears less than the actual hidden object segments themselves. And, it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, I didn't hate that, but I will never play another hidden object game. And like, even the version I won on Steam Gifts was actually the collector's edition, which comes with a bonus mission about Jesse James. And you'd think, oh yeah, finally we get more Jesse James. He's going to do something cool. No. Jesse James shows up in the intro. He says, I'm going to get you. And then he shows up at the ending when you defeat him. And that is the extent of the bonus collector's edition mission for Midnight Mysteries, The Witches of Abraham. And apparently this Midnight Mysteries is like a whole franchise where you're like Angela Lansbury writing all these murder mysteries, and they're all inspired by your adventures through time with ghosts. And it's just, no. It would be so much more enjoyable if they leaned a little bit harder into actually establishing a well-told story with like good characters and good character moments. Like, that's the whole thing that drags this game down, is they have characters, right? They have Abraham Lincoln's whole family, they have a bunch of his friends, they have a cast of like 3 or 4 villains, the Coven of Witches, and you have to defeat each witch one by one as you travel throughout time. And nobody has any personality to speak of whatsoever. Nobody has any dialogue. It's all just this really flat, generic, lame, just... There's no meat on these bones. It's almost like an educational game or something. So, I don't necessarily think I would recommend any hidden object game, but maybe there's cool ones out there, part of like this Christmas sale that Steam has been having. I think the Steam Discovery queue, because I played this stupid Witches of Abraham game, the Steam Discovery queue must have recommended every single hidden object game on Steam to me, because it thought, oh, you played like 2 hours of Witches of Abraham, maybe you'd like this weird BioShock ripoff we made that's a hidden object game, maybe you'd like this Jack the Ripper hidden object game. Maybe you'd like this fairy tale mystery game that has hidden objects in it. There's like 30 hidden object games on Steam, and I must have clicked not interested on every single one of them. Okay, so that was October. What was notable after October? Apparently nothing. No, there was a couple games I played. A couple more games in October I played that were of note, let's say. A Half-Life mod called C.A.G.E.D, and that is C.A.G.E.D. It's like an acronym. I don't know what C.A.G.E.D stands for, but that's just what it's called. It's Half-Life C.A.G.E.D. It is by a former employee of Valve, actually. He was a map designer. for the original Half-Life. So it makes like, there's like this weird lineage here, right? Where this guy actually worked for Valve, and then he left Valve, and then he made a mod for Half-Life. He made more levels for the game he officially worked on for Valve. It's cool and it's weird, and as you might expect, like, this mod is amazing. It's available on Steam. I think you definitely need to own Half-Life 1 to play it. Obviously, but it's available on Steam. If you search Half-Life C.A.G.E.D, you'll find it. You can install it for free. It doesn't cost anything. It's about, we'll say, like an hour, 2 hours long, and it is worth basically every minute. It is a fantastic single-player mod for Half-Life. The basic premise is that it's got kind of like this 1980s vibe to it. Lots of synthwave music, sort of almost like neon colors a little bit. It's a prison break game. You're in prison with a bunch of other like Half-Life 1 scientists for some reason. It's not really explained why you're in jail, just that you're in jail and you need to break out. And that is the whole crux of this game, is that, or this mod, I guess, if you want to call it. It's treated like its own game. And, that's basically it. There's stealth sections, you fight a bunch of soldiers, and, the soldier AI for Half-Life 1 is still fantastic. You fight a bunch of helicopters, you screw around with security systems, you crawl through vents. If you like Half-Life 1, you owe it to yourself to download Half-Life C.A.G.E.D, because it's really good. And like, as short as it is, maybe it is, I said earlier it was about 2 hours long, maybe it's only about an hour long. It's incredibly short. It's like 3 or 4 maps. But it has built-in replay value. After you finish the game the first time, after the credits finish rolling, it actually cuts to like an achievement map where it's been tracking everything you've been doing through the game. And there's like 10 or 15 different achievements that give you reasons to replay it on higher difficulties, to seek out certain things in the environment. Like, there's certain destructibles that it counts. There's certain characters you can go meet that are hidden deep within the world. There's all this like extra content, which is something like I'm a huge fan of. Like, my patrons probably know about this, about all the games I've made and how some of them are like really short. And usually I'll add like a mission mode if I know that it's really short, to just kind of, for people who want to keep playing, here is more content to keep you playing. And that's exactly what this game does. It is exactly, well, I was almost going to say that it was perfect, and that's not true. It's not perfect. But it is very good. And the only reason I say it's not perfect, I guess, is because it's old. Like, the graphics are Half-Life 1, all the animation, all that stuff, it's old. It's a retro game, basically. And even though it may play well, it's not a modern game. It's not pretty. It's not beautiful. The problems that Half-Life might have had with controls or whatever else are still present in this game. And, Half-Life was a very, very good game, and this is a very, very good mod for Half-Life, as one would expect from someone who actually worked on Half-Life. So, again, that's Half-Life C.A.G.E.D. That did come out this year, so that will be my third 2017 game. That probably goes above Sonic Mania, but below Breath of the Wild. So we have a top 3 now. It's Breath of the Wild at number 1, Half-Life C.A.G.E.D number 2, and then Sonic Mania at number 3. Okay, so what is next? Fancy Pants Adventures, or I guess to be more technical, Super Fancy Pants Adventures. I don't know if any of you remember much about this game. I feel like I'm one of the only people on planet Earth who still knows what Fancy Pants Adventures is. Maybe some of you were Sonic fans and you remember it a little bit better. Basically, back on Congregate and Newgrounds, when those websites were big portals for like web games and stuff like that, was this guy, gosh, I can't remember what his name was. It's like Scott or Brad, something like that. He made this game called Fancy Pants Adventures, and it was this kind of like Sonic the Hedgehog sort of game where you played as this stick figure with wavy hair and baggy pants, and you ran around these very like Sonic the Hedgehog environments, these big like sloping hills, and it was very, very fun. One of like the very first YouTube videos. Well, actually, maybe I don't even know if it's on YouTube anymore. One of the very first videos I ever recorded and uploaded uploaded of like gameplay footage of anything at all was of the original Fancy Pants Adventures in like 2005. And that was, I think, World 3, so there were 2 more worlds before that. And after Fancy Pants Adventures came out, we'll say like 5 or 6 years passed, and the developer of Fancy Pants Adventures, to back up a little bit, like the indie game scene was starting to grow and develop on like Xbox Live Arcade, and the developer of Fancy Pants Adventures was, I guess he finally recognized this, that, this was his chance to elevate his career out of making just these little simple web games and make something bigger and more impressive. And around this time also, EA, Electronic Arts, was starting up this program called like EA Presents, I think it was, where they were like, oh yeah, we're going to take these indie developers under our wing, and then we're going to publish their games, and we're going to make them rock stars. And one of the only games they published under the EA Presents label was The Fancy Pants Adventures for Xbox Live Arcade and PSN. And that game kind of came and went. I don't think anyone really paid attention to it. It didn't really make waves. It didn't really make a splash. And I remember playing the demo for The Fancy Pants Adventures and not really like enjoying it very much. It felt a little weird, a little bit different, a little bit more stilted than I remember the Flash game feeling. It wasn't the same. It wasn't right. And, that game came and went. Nobody paid any attention to it. Or at least, nobody I knew felt like they paid any attention to The Fancy Pants Adventures. After that, the developer of Fancy Pants Adventures stayed with Electronic Arts, and he ended up making another web game for them, Mirror's Edge 2D, which I think is still online to this day. Mirror's Edge 2D took the Fancy Pants Adventures engine and evolved it one step further. So now you were Faith from Mirror's Edge running around this 2D world, doing like all these really cool, like Sonic the Hedgehog sort of things, doing all like this cool parkour moves. And a lot of people actually have very fond memories of Mirror's Edge 2D, myself included. And, over the years, like over the course of like 3 or 4, maybe even like 5 years, the developer of Fancy Pants Adventures actually kept updating Mirror's Edge 2D. He kept developing new levels for it. He kept fixing bugs in the game, or at least that's what it felt like to me, because I remember playing the very first version of Mirror's Edge 2D and kind of finishing it in around like, 10, 15, maybe 30 minutes. It was like 1 or 2 levels long. And then years passed, and I went back to Mirror's Edge 2D to play it again, and the whole game was like different. It was completely different. There were way more levels. There was like a story mode. There was, more polished mechanics, all kinds of different things that weren't there when I'd played the game originally. So I think, like, even after Mirror's Edge sort of faded out of the public consciousness, I think the developers of Mirror's Edge 2D kept on updating the game, kept on refining Mirror's Edge 2D, adding new levels, things like that. And after that, after Mirror's Edge 2D, I think he eventually did, sort of taper off and stop working on it. It kind of seemed like the guy faded into nothing. He just kind of laid low for a while and lived his life, and every now and then I'd check up, see, what's this guy doing? Does he have any more, like, Fancy Pants Adventures games coming? Is he doing anything with Mirror's Edge 2D? And it was always just kind of silent, and, more and more years ended up passing, and there was just, eventually I just stopped checking up on him. And apparently, while I was ignoring him, he ended up releasing some Fancy Pants stuff on, like, phones and tablets and things like that. I never really paid attention to that. And then just this year in 2017, he ended up releasing Super Fancy Pants Adventures for Steam. And it's basically a sequel to the Xbox Live Arcade game. It sort of picks up where that one left off. I guess the end of the Fancy Pants Adventures probably ended on like some kind of a flood or something, because that's where this game begins, is after the flood. The world is irrevocably changed, and I seem to remember that the villains of the Fancy Pants Adventures for Xbox Live Arcade and PSN were these pirates, and the pirates return again in Super Fancy Pants Adventure, but now they're your friends. And there's all these hooks to like the past games, so it's not like a remake, it is like a genuine sequel. And being a fan of the original Flash games, I bought it straight away. And it's good. It is probably the best game that the Fancy Pants Adventures has ever been. There's all these like hats, and you can collect different pants, and there's, clothing customization, and just it feels really good to play. It animates super, super well, and he added all these new mechanics. One of the things he added for Super Fancy Pants Adventures is early on, you find like objects that are falling out of the real world. So one of the very first things you find is like this pencil, right? And the pencil sort of acts like a sword. You can hit things with it, you can knock things around, and that's kind of your melee weapon. And eventually you upgrade from the pencil to a fountain pen. And the fountain pen like vastly expands your abilities. You get the ability to surf on the fountain pen across pieces of paper. You get like projectile attacks because you squirt the ink at enemies. You can still use it like a sword and stab and whack enemies with it. And it feels so good to play, and I wish it ran better on my laptop. Because it's one of those games where, I play it on my laptop and it's running at like, we'll say 30 frames per second. And you think, oh, okay, this doesn't feel so bad. It's a little bit slow and it's a little bit floaty, but I can manage this. And then during that like 2-week span where my desktop was up and running, I installed Super Fancy Pants Adventures on that, and it was like night and day. Apparently, when Super Fancy Pants Adventures is running at 30 frames per second, what that actually means is that the game is running at half speed. So playing it on my desktop, playing it at 60 frames per second, that's the way the game is intended to be played. That is like the proper speed it's meant to be played. And, now I feel like I can't go back to it on my laptop because it is so sluggish feeling. So I'm probably only like maybe 10% of the way through that game, but the little bits I did play of it, which was like an hour of it, it seems like a very long, very fun game that I would definitely recommend. Given that I haven't played it very far, I would say I wouldn't, like on the list of 2017 releases we have laid out here, I don't know if it would go above Sonic Mania, because again, I haven't played but just a little bit of Super Fancy Pants. So, I don't know, man. But it's a good game, I would say. If it keeps introducing new abilities, keeps evolving the ink pen abilities, that's going to be a really good game, and I definitely can't wait to get back to it. What else we got here? I think that might do it for October. And after October, we jump to... Well, there's November. November is full of a bunch of games I haven't played yet. Just a bunch of new purchases, like Sonic Forces. Haven't played Sonic Forces yet. Shin Megami Tensei Synchronicity Prologue. By the time you're listening to this, that game is no longer available for download. It was a temporary promotional game, intended to promote the 3DS version of Shin Megami Tensei, Strange Journey, because one thing like Atlas has been doing lately, it's this weird thing where they take like DS games they made, which were like, critically acclaimed, really good games, and they've been re-releasing them on the 3DS with like updated features. They did a new version of Radiant Historia, they did a new bunch of like remakes of Etrian Odyssey, and they're doing this remake of Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey, and they released this Synchronicity Prologue game to promote Strange Journey on the 3DS. Excuse me. And it's this kind of 2D Metroidvania where you play as Jack Frost, which is the little snowman with the blue cap. And he goes hee-ho and stuff like that. For a free game that was only there to promote a different game, Synchronicity Prologue is like strangely very good. And it seems to be like a very long game too. Like I haven't actually beaten it yet. I've probably put like 3 or 4 hours into it yet. It's a Metroidvania, and I think it said my map completion after 4 hours was still... Whoops, I just moved one of my closet doors here. After the 4 hours, the map completion only said I was like maybe 25% of the way through the game. So it does seem to be like this big full-length Metroidvania, and which makes it like super weird that it was only available for a limited time. When Atlus put it up, it was a game released only by Atlus of Japan, I should note. When they put it up, they said that it would be going away in, I think, either December or January, which is, again, we're in January, so this game isn't available anymore for download, at least not officially from Atlus. And it's really weird that they would release what is such a meaty piece of content and then pull it away and not actually leave it up permanently. Because it's not like a web game or anything. This isn't like something that's embedded in a website. This is an executable for your desktop that it appears to be a full, complete game that they released for free. And it was only available for about 4 months. And I don't know like how well this will register for you, but during the big Steam Greenlight rush, there was a game called Pharaoh Rebirth Plus, I think. And it's sort of like a Metroidvania, but you're this little rabbit guy and you explore like Egyptian tombs or whatever. And that's who Atlus hired to do this Synchronicity Prologue game. And you can tell that it's actually running on the same engine as Pharaoh Rebirth Plus. A lot of the HUD is the same, the sprites are roughly the same scale, things like that. And, I don't know, I have to wonder if maybe Atlus is planning on making, a bigger, more full game for Synchronicity Prologue, because it has that in its title. It's a prologue. Maybe they're planning a much bigger, much deeper, much more robust Jack Frost 2D Metroidvania platformer sometime in the future? I don't know. It's very weird that they would put this out for free. And, obviously, if I'm, talking about it for so long, it's actually, a very good game. It is well designed. The sprites are very good. They're well animated. There seems to be, actual thought and planning that goes into enemies. If you've ever played a Shin Megami Tensei game, you know that, elemental weaknesses are a big part of that battle system. Or at least, I've never actually played a Shin Megami Tensei game, but I know that's, a big deal in Persona, right? In Persona, you definitely want to match type weaknesses to the monsters that you're fighting. So, because that will not only let you get through battles quicker, but usually you get experience points bonuses or something like that for matching a monster to its weakness. And all of that plays into Synchronicity Prologue completely, because you're Jack Frost, you have all these ice attacks, and there are enemies that are both weak to ice and enemies that are strong to ice. And as you progress through the game, you meet Jack's other brothers. There's Pyro Jack, and you end up recruiting them and getting their powers so that you can shoot fire, because there are enemies that are weak to fire, there are enemies that are strong to fire. And it's all about sort of matching weaknesses to the abilities that you have. And it is a fun time. It looks good. It controls good. And there is a fan translation patch out there, because as I said earlier, this was something released by Atlus of Japan. So it was all completely in Japanese. And it's not the sort of game where you absolutely need to understand Japanese to be able to successfully play it. But now that there is an English translation patch, it is definitely a much easier game to understand. Even if I think the translation is a little vanilla, we'll say. It's a little, it's more of a translation than a localization, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Which is fine, The guy who translated it did it in 3 days. So, it's insane that he was able to translate almost the entire game in such a short amount of time. And that's out there on the internet. I can't really provide you a link to that. I think he mainly only linked to it on his Twitter, the translator did. So, you're just going to have to find that on your own, I guess. So, sorry about that. So, let's see. Synchronicity Prologue, and then I guess we'll talk about Defunct. Defunct would probably be... we also need to put... If we're doing a Game of the Year ranking, we need to put Synchronicity Prologue somewhere. The really hard thing here is that... Wait, no. I was going to say, did I already put this on the Game of the Year list? But no. The really hard thing about this Game of the Year list is that all the games that are on there right now are, like, actually really good. So, like, putting a game at the bottom of the list feels really harsh. But I think that also just means that the game is also still just really good. So, if I was going to say, Breath of the Wild is still at number 1. That much is true. Half-Life C.A.G.E.D is at number 2. We'll say Sonic Mania is at number 3. Synchronicity Prologue would be at number 4. And then below that would be Super Fancy Pants Adventures, strictly by the virtue that I've only played, like, barely any Super Fancy Pants Adventures. So the final game of 2017 would have been Defunct. And earlier I was talking about a game called Refunct that I think I got for free. But the game I really want to talk about is Defunct. Defunct is this really rare scenario where... So, I was talking earlier about the Steam Discovery queue, right? Where Steam sort of shows you games that are popular on Steam and asks you if you like them or not. And it looks at games that you've played previously, and it tries to send you recommendations based on the things it thinks you like. And usually it is a complete crapshoot. Usually it doesn't show you any games that you're interested in whatsoever. It's a bunch of indie stuff that you've never heard of that doesn't look very good. It's basically just a lot of garbage and a lot of just, like, popular new releases like Assassin's Creed Origins and Wolfenstein 2: The New Order and, just things that everybody is interested in. But much to my surprise, Steam ended up recommending this game to me called Defunct, and it said, "We are recommending this game to you because you've played a lot of Sonic Adventure, and you've played a lot of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing." And immediately that's like, so it's saying that I like Sonic games, and it's recommending this game to me based on the fact that I do. And right away that, catches my interest because it's never done that before. It's never specifically called out Sonic games to me before and said, "We know you like Sonic games, here's something we think you'll enjoy." And that's the weird thing is because Steam ended up being, like, right on the money with this one. Defunct is a game where you play as, like, a little unicycle robot who has a broken motor. And he can't accelerate under his own power. He can only roll down hills. And I think you see where this is going. It's sort of like a 3D platformer, but not really. It's more about rolling down hills and picking up speed in order to ramp off of upslopes and get huge height. And it's kind of just a walking simulator, but it's a walking simulator where you're walking at like 100 miles an hour. It is sort of incredible. It's not the most perfect game in the world. I think the level design could use a little bit of work. You mostly just are rolling through these big valleys that are just full of hills and little else. But as the game progresses, it sort of reveals more and more abilities for your robot to do. They introduce grind rails and a boost mechanic, and it's one of those things where you think, so Steam thought I liked Sonic the Hedgehog games. Steam was correct in its assumption that I like Sonic the Hedgehog games, and it's presenting me this video game that is almost basically just a Sonic the Hedgehog video game. And it does this sort of thing where it actually, nails the classic Sonic physics in 3D very, very well. There's no scripting. You get this boost meter, you get these grind rails, and it's very time trial focused. That's actually where, most of the challenge of the game comes from, I assume, is the time trial mode. Because if you just play the campaign mode, you're just kind of sightseeing these giant, valley maps where you're rolling down hills and finding lines through environments and not really, there's not very many, I don't think there's any enemies to fight. It's all mainly just about rolling really, really fast. So all of the challenge would be completing certain sections of these maps as quickly as possible. And, the game, like I'm saying, has this online leaderboard mode where presumably the real deal is. And just, it's really, really fun. And, the good thing about Defunct for me is that when it was recommended to me on Steam, it was only 99 cents, because it was during the Steam holiday sale. And by now, it's probably back up to $10. And I think it's also on sale on PS4 and Xbox One now, probably for around maybe $15, I think I saw it. Maybe it's $10. I don't know if I'd pay $10 for this game, but at 99 cents, I am very satisfied. And again, that's one of those games where I can't wait to get my desktop back up and running, because it does run on my laptop, but I have to turn all the settings all the way down as low as they will go. And even then, I only get like maybe 30 frames per second, maybe 40. So we need to figure out where Defunct is going to go on this list. And I think, so number 1, Breath of the Wild. Number 2, Half-Life C.A.G.E.D. Number 3, Sonic Mania. Number 4 is, we'll put Defunct at number 4. Then it will be Shin Megami Tensei, Synchronicity Prologue at number 5, and then Super Fancy Pants Adventures at number 6. That is my Game of the Year list, right there for your viewing pleasure. And I think that just about wraps up the Game of the Year list. I'm trying to think if there is one more game I guess I could talk about, but I don't remember if I bought it before the end of 2017. It's listed here as 2018, but it's also, I think I forgot to update. Well, I don't think I forgot. I know I forgot to update my Backloggery list. I wanted to update it one more time before the end of the year, and I ended up forgetting about it. But I did end up buying Parappa the Rapper 2 on PS4 as a PS2 classic. It was, sometimes I guess Sony just, as like a holiday gift, they'll just give out $10 PSN cards to everyone. So they'll like credit $10 to your PSN wallet or whatever. And as it turns out, Parappa the Rapper 2 was $10, so I ended up buying it. And I've only played like 3 songs of Parappa the Rapper 2. And heads up, I don't really like Parappa the Rapper 2. I don't hate it. I feel like that's a big theme in my life right now, is that I don't like it, but I don't hate it. I think I've talked about Parappa the Rapper 2 before on this podcast, and generally speaking, what I really like about Parappa the Rapper 1 is how sincere the game is. Like, it's just about a boy who loves a girl, and he's trying to impress her, and he's trying to live his life, and through these goals of just trying to, have a crush on a girl he likes and trying to survive, the lesson is all he has to do is believe in himself, and he can accomplish anything. He can get the girl, he can become a famous rapper, he can learn karate, he can get a job, he can buy his own car. Those are very normal things, and they're kind of wrapped around in this wacky world full of these colorful characters, and that's where the appeal of Parappa the Rapper comes from for me, is, it's just it's normal life, but it's just twisted a little bit. It's a little bit weird. It's more just the fact that everyone looks so weird that is so enjoyable about the game. And with Jammer Lammy and now Parappa the Rapper 2, they kind of increase the wacky a little bit. They sort of lean on the aspect that people think they're wacky, so they sort of make being wacky the focus of the game. So, or at least more the focus of the game. So like Parappa the Rapper 2 opens with Parappa telling this story about how he won a lifetime supply of noodles and how much he hates noodles. And the whole game is about how his girlfriend from the first game, Sunny Funny, now thinks that he's acting like a baby because he doesn't like noodles. And there's like this whole plot about how Parappa the Rapper is like this Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style inventor. And it's a little too wacky for its own good. It sort of loses the thread of what made the first Parappa the Rapper game so appealing. And, I'm not the biggest fan of that. The emulation on PS4 is perfect. I know I've complained in the past about how Parappa the Rapper is a very timing-sensitive game, and how I think, the messed up timings are why people complain about how hard later versions of Parappa the Rapper is. I know that when I've emulated the PSP version of Parappa 1, I never can manage to pass the first level. A Parappa remaster came out on the PS4. A lot of people were complaining that it was too hard. Though I downloaded the demo for that remaster, and I didn't have any problems with it, so I don't know what those people's problem is. But Parappa the Rapper 2 seems to be a flawless emulation. I don't think they upscale it any for the PS4. It does look a little cleaner than I was expecting, but I think it still is 480p, 480i, something like that. I'm not actually sure, but it plays fine. It's just, it's not, it's a little too goofy for me. It's a little too, hey, look how wacky we are. Here's my monkey dance. That kind of thing. When that's not why I liked Parappa the Rapper, or at least why I liked Parappa the Rapper was a lesser version of that, where it wasn't so overt and in your face and like the entire reason anyone cares about that game. But I think that would probably be the last game of 2017. And since it wasn't a 2017 release, it's not going to be part of the list. I don't think... There is one more game that I think I might have gotten for 2017, but I think that might have been a 2018 game. I have a friend who is developing an indie game called Aliens Go Home Run. Sorry, I misread my list here. And that game is basically just, imagine baseball plus Arkanoid, and that's basically it. It's a pretty cool game. I've played about, we'll say, an hour of it. The structure seems, these are criticisms that I was going to levy in a Steam review if I ever got around to writing one and playing more of the game. It's a good game. I like the game, but I feel like the structure is just a little flat. Like, you finish a level and it just dumps you back to a level. Blah, 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 blah. I can't talk. You finish a level and it dumps you back to a level select screen in a way that feels a little abrupt. But, mechanically it is very sound. It's not just baseball plus Arkanoid. It's also got kind of like a bullet hell shooter sort of thing going on. So you have to like dodge shots. You have to hit baseballs with your bat. You have to clear out all the blocks like Arkanoid. There's a lot of different systems going on, and they're all, pretty fun. There's like a Gradius upgrade system, where you can get like power-ups, like 2 balls and a shield and the ability to shoot projectiles out of your bat, things like that. It's a pretty fun game. It's pretty cheap on Steam. Again, I feel a little bit biased, because, it's a friend that like helped promote Overbite when that game came out last year, the Game Jam version. But I do like it. I should play more of it because I was having like quite a bit of fun while I was playing around with it when he gifted it to me, because it was like this weird thing. Again, we're going to go back to the Steam queue where I was just clicking through games on the Steam queue, and all of a sudden Aliens Go Home Run came up, and I tweeted a picture at him like, hey, look at what Steam just recommended me. And I ended up throwing it on my wish list, and about like a week later he just gifted me a copy. So again, I don't know if that was late 2017 or late 2018, but I guess that does count as a 2017 release, so it can go on the list if I really want to put it there. I might put it above Fancy Pants Adventures, actually, because again, I haven't played much Fancy Pants Adventures, but I've probably played about just as much of Aliens Go Home Run as I have of Super Fancy Pants Adventures, that becomes like a tough dilemma, doesn't it? Is Aliens Go Home Run better than Super Fancy Pants Adventures? Would it be a cop-out to say that they're tied because I haven't played enough of either game yet to really definitively say where they belong on this list? Is that just something really cheap and stupid that I can do? Because if it is, then I will definitely do it. So, there you go. Tied for, 6th place, we have Super Fancy Pants Adventures and Aliens Go Home Run. And if you have the time, check out Aliens Go Home Run on Steam. He promoted my game, I'm going to promote his. But I think that is it for Game of the Year stuff. And I haven't even really been playing very many games lately. With all the moving and family stuff, all these PS4 games that I bought, Yakuza, Kiwami, the Uncharted collection, and then most recently, Titanfall 2, for PS4. Newegg was having a sale on it for about $7.50, so I went ahead and I bought it. It actually just arrived here today when I went down and I checked the mail during the break earlier. There was actually like a mix-up. It was supposedly delivered yesterday, but it never was actually delivered to me. So I was actually doing like a support ticket with Newegg saying, where's my package? I never received it. And someone actually wrote on the envelope, not at this address, because I guess, like, DHL handled the delivery, and they delivered it to the wrong apartment, apparently. And whoever received it instead of me actually just thankfully sent it back, and it was finally correctly delivered to me today. So, all those games, I haven't played any of them yet. I hear Yakuza is like, I keep saying Yakuza. It's Yakuza. Yakuza games tend to be like super long, don't they? But I've also heard, because Kiwami is a remake of the first Yakuza game, that it actually tends to be a little bit shorter than, say, something like Yakuza 0 or whatever. So, I don't know. That's been something that's been on my mind. I've been thinking about starting an Uncharted game at some point here soon. I played the demo for Titanfall 2 and really liked it, which is the reason why I picked up the PS4 version. Though I am a little bit bummed out that I got the PS4 version. That definitely feels like a game that would probably play a lot better on a keyboard and mouse, but that would also require buying it from Origin. That would require having my PC fixed, things like that. So, I can't play that anywhere except the PS4 right now. But I guess that'll just about wrap it up. I don't really have anything too more important to say. I could talk about the things I got for Christmas, I guess. It wasn't like the worst Christmas in the world, but, it wasn't like the best Christmas in the world either. Again, didn't love it, didn't hate it. No, that's terrible. I was actually really impressed with how well Christmas went for me. After, I'm being so homesick, going through all the stuff I've gone through, things like that. It has been a rough end of the year for me. And thankfully, I have really good friends that came through for me in the end. I complain about going to all these family social gatherings, and, that's actually probably not as bad as it sounds either. So, I did end up, someone gifted me, like 4 really cheap games on Steam. It was Saints Row 4. I'm trying to think of what Roman numerals are, but my brain is kind of turning to mush after all this thoughting about video games. Gosh, I need to end this podcast. I got gifted Saints Row 4, Grim Fandango Remastered, System Shock Classic, System Shock Enhanced Edition, System Shock 2, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, The Dig, Loom. Oh, that's the end of it. It was like basically a pack of LucasArts adventure games plus System Shock and Saints Row. But again, don't have a PC for any of that, so I can't really play any of it right now. I might be able to get away with playing like Indiana Jones or The Dig or Loom or something. My cousin, for Christmas, he rebuilt his wife's desktop computer, and I guess he got a bunch of free games that she didn't want, so he ended up gifting me a Uplay copy of Assassin's Creed Origins and a Steam copy of Total War Warhammer 2. Assassin's Creed Origins makes the 4th Assassin's Creed game I have been either gifted or gotten for free that I have never played. I've never played an Assassin's Creed game. I have Assassin's Creed 2 for PC and Xbox 360. I have 3, I have Black Flag, and now I have Origins. And I've put maybe an hour into Assassin's Creed 2. Black Flag is definitely something that interests me quite a lot. That is the Assassin's Creed game that I was really chomping at the bit to get, because I like the idea of being a pirate that sails the high seas, going on adventures and things like that. Sea of Thieves from Rare kind of interests me a little bit, and so does that, Black Sails game Ubisoft recently announced. But both of those games kind of have their own quirks that kind of turn me off from them too. Both games are about, they're multiplayer focused for one, and as I said, over an hour ago, I'm not a big multiplayer kind of guy, so the idea of having to get together 5, 6, 7, 8 friends to pilot, or I guess captain a ship together, it seems like a nightmare that will never happen. I imagine that Black Sails game or whatever. Is it Black Sails or Skull and Bones or something? That Ubisoft game? Those servers are going to be a ghost town a month after release. because that does not seem like a game you want to play with randos very much at all. And Sea of Thieves, Sea of Thieves, I don't really see much of a game there. It just looks like a screwing around simulator. Which, there's room for that, but also, who cares? But yeah, I think that's all the video games. I think that's everything. Oh, I talked about the video games I got for Christmas, but I did not talk about anything else I got for Christmas. I got a couple of movies. I got Deadpool on Blu-ray, which is very nice, very good. I got Logan on Blu-ray, so I kind of completed the collection of the 2 best Marvel movies that aren't part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The 2 Marvel movies made by Fox, which I guess is technically... Well, bump the mic again. 2, like, Fox is now part of Disney, which technically is part of Marvel. Whew, what a mess. And then I also got a classic Sonic Nendoroid and Orbot and Cubot, the little Sonic Boom figures. So, good Christmas all around. Oh, also, I got like a Christmas stocking full of survival gear. Like, as weird as that sounds. Got like a really nice survival knife, a really nice like tactical flashlight, some emergency blankets, things like that. But yeah, that was my Christmas. It's not a bad Christmas. I'm happy. I'm content. I'm satisfied with it. And I think that will do it for this podcast. Upcoming things. I am planning an article. I've written out part of an article for bltn.net. It's just a weird sort of idea that came to me like a month ago. A wish list of features if Sega was ever to do a PC port of Sonic Unleashed. I feel kind of embarrassed writing a listicle like that. I don't know if it, it might not actually go up, but at this point I've written on it enough that it should probably go up just out of the sunk cost fallacy, let's say. And then I am committed to writing a review of Sonic Runner's Adventure for TSSC News. That's an alright game. It's not as good as the original Sonic Runners, but it's not bad. Again, don't love it, don't hate it. The theme of 2018. Don't love it, don't hate it. But what I do love is that you Patreon supporters have supported me all this time. For those of you listening to the free version of this podcast on YouTube, you can go to patreon.com/BlazeHedgehog, sign up for $1 a month, and you'll get these podcasts the day they release. And that's an advertisement that I should probably cut out for my Patreon listeners. But I guess it depends in February whether or not I have my computer hooked up or not. Because I can't really put the introductory advertisement in the front of the YouTube version, but I'll stop rambling now. My jaw is actually starting to hurt from talking so much. I assume this is going to be another 2-hour podcast, and that's not something I wanted to do. But I will see you guys in February when February gets here. And until then, I'm going to go watch more AGDQ. I'm going to finish hauling stuff out of my brother's shed back over here to the house. And who knows, maybe there'll be games coming out soon from me, maybe there'll be articles coming out for me soon, maybe I'll do artwork and music again. And, just 2018, the real theme of 2018 is getting back into gear, getting back to doing the things I like to do. So, here's to that, I guess, and I'll see you guys next time on the next podcast, whenever that is. Bye!